Hello and welcome back to my channel and to part 5. Today I'll be kicking off with some donated parts from Pre-MOT. I had some trouble getting hold of some of these specialist pieces for the fuel tank, but thankfully Pre-MOT saved the day with these pieces, so thank you so much for that. So here we have some genuine Land Rover fuel tank screw bolt plates, a fuel tank bracket from Pre-MOT, some tank spacers or mounting rubbers, whatever you'd like to call them. And this is those parts assembled together now. Now, you may remember this from the last video, but I have a brain like a sieve. So I actually forgot to order some more of these mountain rubbers. So I did end up using 2 of the old ones, but it wasn't that much of an issue. I just chose the best out of the old ones and used 2 of those. And this is the order that I placed the washers, so the normal washer, spring washer and nylock nut. Now, this was a 2-man job, so unfortunately I didn't capture any of this on camera. I actually had an assistant bench pressing the fuel tank and guard up whilst I sort of fiddled with all the bolts and washers and everything and made sure everything were in place. And of course, where would I be without Laddie, the Clarker Works, making sure that everything's running smoothly. And you may notice the fuel tank and fuel tank guard from a few episodes ago where I were actually spraying these with the Corollas products, so again, I'll leave a link in the description and I'll also leave a little pop-out banner now, so if you've missed that episode, you can go back and watch it. Now I'm popping in the top shock mount brackets. I'm just popping the new bolts in there and torquing them up. Now, you can do this by feel. The reason that I didn't do this by feel is just because I wanted to ensure it was torqued up correctly, but if you feel confident enough to do it your own way, and if you are doing this job, feel free. Here I am now with the A-frame articulating ball joint, and this is the exhaust pipe clamp that I use just to fit over that ball joint to push it in with the press that's behind me. And now I'm just popping in the self-leveling unit top and bottom ball joints. I'm just applying some lithium multi-purpose grease now and getting a good amount into that freshly prepped and painted bracket. Now just a touch of thread locker. Screw that in. Now this gator is basically obsolete, you can't get it anymore, but what I did find was a universal track rod end boot actually is perfect for the job. It was a little bit fiddly, but if you are doing this job, I just found one in my local auto parts shop and it is just more than adequate. So this is the self-leveling unit, fully refurbished and assembled together now. You can still get the bottom gator, so that wasn't an issue at all. But as I say, the other gator is obsolete now, you won't be able to find it. And if you can, I reckon the price won't be worth it. So a universal track rod end boot, absolutely bob on. Now, because I am very clumsy, I've managed to chip the paint on the self-leveling unit. I'm just going to touch that up with the Corollas S primer and then the glass reinforced top coat. But this is it, assembled together and refurbished with brand new gaiters and ball joints. And that is the self-leveling unit installed. Those are the bolts that go through the cross member in the chassis. And this is the other side of it bolted to the top there, all assembled in with the A-frame. And here is the axle ready. One of the most popular questions I did get asked a lot in the last episode was how I was planning on getting this axle outside. The bathroom that I was working in is downstairs, so it wasn't too much of a hassle to get it outside, to be honest. It did take a few of us to get it outside to ensure that nothing got bent or chipped, but it wasn't too much of a difficult process. So these are the very snazzy brand new Cunifer brake pipes. A little mistake that I did make with the brake pipes is I shouldn't have made them up and placed them on at this point. I did have to amend these once the axle was installed. So a little bit of an error there, but at least you can see what it'll look like before it's under the vehicle. So here are some brand new standard rear springs, and I'm just using some heavy duty spring retention clamps. One of the previous owners did fit heavy duty springs, but because the self-levelling unit does work, I didn't really see any point in installing some heavy duty springs again. Those are the freshly prepped and painted trailing arms. Again, another little bit of an error installing the springs at this stage. They just kind of got in the way, made the job a little bit more fiddly and awkward, so I ended up removing them, but again, for your viewing pleasure, that's why I've included this clip. And this is just what the heavy duty brackets look like. And this way I can just show you how they fit as well. Now, I didn't get any footage of the axle being reinstalled because it was just all hands on deck trying to shove and push this axle into place without bending or scraping it. And it was just a little bit of a nightmare, to be honest, so I didn't manage to get any clips. So I do apologise about that. And we did just use a dolly, or whatever you'd like to call it, and some wooden planks to help guide the axle into place. And then just located it with the bottom link arms. So the springs actually ended up being one of the last things to be fitted once everything else was located and in place. The lads that helped were absolute angels in wrestling this axle back into place. And I'd also like to say a very special thank you to Reese, who devoted most of his day and evening to helping the cause of getting this axle back into place. So thank you so much, you are an absolute star. So the bottom links were attached first, and then attached at the top with the A-frame arms and the ball joint, and that's it, all looking fresh in place, and just when everyone could just sit back and have a breather, because honestly it took a good few hours to get everything into place. So that's brand new ball joints and gaiters, and then once everything was attached and in place, I fit the springs then and just popped them into place. And we also used a jack to kind of seesaw the axle into position. This also helped to guide the springs into place. And then it took two of us to fit the shocks. And I am thoroughly impressed with the team, because despite this being an absolutely awkward and awful process, we didn't chip any paint hardly, and I just can't thank the team enough. They were absolutely spot on. Once everything was jacked up and the bottom bolt was in the shocks, it was actually just resting on the shocks at that point, as you can see there. And that was basically the axle in place at that point. Here are some fixings from YRM. As you can see, I did use stainless steel bolts wherever I could, like on the anti-roll bar bush retaining clamps for example, and the anti-roll bar bottom links. And as you can see, I did use stainless steel fixings as much as possible for anti-corrosion. Now, I didn't use stainless steel fixings everywhere. In other places I did just use the normal mild steel bolts, and that's because of the shear strength required. Just because it's not good to use stainless steel bolts in certain scenarios, such as when you're under high tensile loads. But YRM sell the A4, which is equivalent to an 8.8 bolt, I think. Again, just to help with corrosion wherever possible. As you probably know by now, everything that I've done along this whole process is to prevent corrosion as much as possible. I just taught these up now because I didn't think they'd need to be under load. So it's basically gone from looking very sorry for itself with no rear axle to this. So all that was left to do was attach the wheels, let everything settle and torque everything up. And as per the workshop manual, it was very important that I didn't torque anything up at this stage. It's important to get everything just fitted and in place. And then once the vehicle is laden on its suspension, that's when you torque everything up. After torquing everything up, I let it settle again, and then I just went round every single nut and bolt again and ensured that they were at the correct torque setting. The last thing that I wanted was the axle to come loose, so this was quite an important step. So everything has got brand new bolts with copper grease on. So as I say, once the axle was under its own weight, I also used split pins where applicable and ensured that everything was torqued up correctly. And there's my new join. That just patches into the old brake pipe work, and that's just my very fancy cunifer line running there, which I unfortunately had to do in situ, but this tool was absolutely brilliant. As you've probably guessed, this is the brake flaring tool. I'm just using this in situ, as you can see, to get the double flare there. So that's already in a single flare, and that is my operation 2 I'm about to use to do the double flare. For the joint for the brake flexi there, you can see. So there is my double flared end that I used for the connection. So this tool that I'm using uses like a little hydraulic ram. I found it very useful. I didn't find any leaks or anything like that. The tool worked perfectly, and I just think it did the cunifer quite well, really. That's just the brand new fuel filler hose. And then this is the point where I put the wheels on. Just rattling those in with my impact, just going round in a star pattern and then again in a circle. This was just done as a rough job for now, so I could put the vehicle down under its own weight. Those bearings still feel nice and smooth. So I was at the point now where I was ready to jack the vehicle up to remove the axle stands from underneath it. And honestly, by this point, I couldn't believe the time had come where we're going to be finally back on all 4 wheels after months. I did have a little proud moment to myself as well, because honestly, it had been months of rolling about in dirt and muck under a tarpaulin on the driveway, and it just been the couple of months from hell, so I did have a proud moment to myself. So this is just everything looking freshly prepped and painted. You can probably see the brand new cunifer brake lines that I'd fitted there looking very snazzy. So here we have the seat box cross member. Again, this was galvanised from YRM, and it had the full Corollas treatment, so the Corollas S primer and then again the glass reinforced top coat. Again, I just used a mixture of stainless steel fixings and some standard 8.8 bolts, just wherever applicable. Just fitting that bracket onto the sill C section. So this job is actually why all this work started. I also tried to stick to the workshop manual as much as possible, so where it recommends washers, spring washers, nylock nuts, all that jazz. I cross-referenced the workshop manual with the parts diagram. These two were the biggest help in getting all of this back together. So another question that I was asked quite a lot was if I'd make a Patreon account or some way of people being able to donate towards the channel and equipment and things like that. So you may have noticed already, but I've actually set up YouTube memberships, which is similar to Patreon, but it's actually all in-house on YouTube. So I've left a link to that in the description, along with my newly created Patreon account, and to a PayPal me link as well, just in case anybody wanted to make a one-off donation. Now, I am no way whatsoever pressuring anybody to send any donations. It's just simply because I was getting so many questions asking if I had any of these accounts for people to put towards the projects, equipment, the channel. But thank you so much if you've done this already, and thank you to anybody that is going to sign up. So now this is the 110 turn round, because I did have some work to do on the front. Of course, as usual, I'm working out in the elements under a tarpaulin, crawling about in the muck and dirt. But anyway, the next job to tackle was the rusty shock turrets. Quickly, I thought I'd show you the horrible weather that I've been working in, this kind of damp, overcast weather where it's just hard to see or do anything because it's just so sticky and muddy, and it was just pretty disgusting, to be honest. Now, just jacking the front up to finally address the corrosion on the front. Starting with the shock towers, and look at those, I could actually put my finger straight through one of them. I just wanted to really refresh everything. Brand new shocks, shock towers, springs, things like that. Brand new dampers. As you can see, this is the original damper, and that bush has certainly seen better days. So by the end of it, this vehicle would basically have all brand new OEM springs, shocks, things like that, bushes. These shock towers rotting out is just such a common problem. Can you see my little finger there that's got a plaster on it? By this point, I was feeling sorry for myself, so of course I got the most minor inconvenient cut. Well, it must have been, because I can't remember what I did, so it must have been very minor and insignificant. But you know when you get to that point where you just think, oh, I'm feeling pretty sorry for myself at this point, so, you know, just whack a plaster on there, make other people feel sorry for you, even though this is all your own doing. But yeah, there's my little feel sorry for me plaster if you haven't noticed. But anyway, back to the shock towers. So I've got brand new galvanised shock towers that you probably saw me spraying up in an earlier episode. Now I'm just using my impact gun to take out those bolts on the shock towers. This one did come off without too much of a fight, but the other ones just ended up snapping or whatever. So this one actually came out pretty well, to be honest. So it was quite a good job that I captured this one on camera to make it look like I were doing an easy, effortless job. So here I am just using some spring clamps now, and that just puts a bit of compression on those springs. I did wind these down as carefully as I could because I didn't want them pinging out and breaking my face or something. And I had to take all of this lot off now to get to that top plate to push the shock towers up to remove them. And after carefully removing them, that's what these look like. Now, to be fair to this spring, it was completely serviceable, but whilst I was going to this effort, I thought the springs are pretty cheap, so I may as well just replace them. And again, I didn't get any clips because again, it was just like a two-man job and I couldn't be filming whilst trying to tackle all of this in the dark, so I do apologise about not getting that on camera. But there we are, and that's what the area looks like after cleaning it all up with a wire wheel on an angle grinder. Now, to be completely open and honest, I'm not going to do as good a job as the back. I just thought I'd leave it there for now, you know, just give it a quick clean up, the Corollas treatment. And whilst I was here, I just thought I'd refresh the bushes in these radius arms. They did come out relatively easy, and as you can see, the bushes are looking quite tired. And I did feel a little bit of play on them through the breaker bar, so I'm quite glad that I did this job. And there is the old corroded track rod bar that I'm planning on replacing. I needed to renew the track rod ends, so I just thought I'd buy a brand new track rod bar. And to be honest with you, they are quite cheap, so why not? I just didn't fancy, you know, struggling again with the old corroded one. It just made more sense in my head to have brand new track rod ends on a brand new track rod bar. You know, just rather than having like the old crusty one. So here I am just giving my dusting of Corollas S primer. And to be honest, I'm not going to hell for leather with this because, as I've said in other videos, I do plan on getting a brand new galvanised chassis for the 110, so it's just like a make do amends job for now to just keep it going for maybe another 2 years basically until like I've got the Series 3 out of the way, and then I'll start thinking about replacing the chassis on the 110. But I just thought, whilst I'm here, and you don't normally get access to all these little nooks and crannies, so I just thought I'll give it the Corollas treatment whilst I'm here. And to be honest with you, the salt grit on the roads just makes me cringe, and honestly the thought of not having any chassis protection just really makes me shudder. And these spring hangers, they didn't have any holes or anything like that in them, still very solid, so it's well worth the dusting of Corollas. So working on the kitchen table now, these are brand new Bogue shocks, galvanised shock towers, spring seats, and I'm using some brand new Liam Froder ball joints, all round track rod ends, things like that. So yeah, some brand new track rod ends in there, and that's everything ready to fit now. So this is the new and the old track rod bar side by side. So I've got the new track rod end basically centre to centre as the old one. So basically what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that I got them centre to centre to try and get the tracking as close to the original as possible. And now I only did this to be roughly correct because I did intend to get the tracking done properly, but just for now I wanted it to be roughly correct. But that is where I'm going to leave it today, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you join me in the next episode where I will be finally, after months, wrapping everything up. So thank you so much again for watching, and I hope to see you there.